Hi, and welcome. It's May Bush, executive coach, speaker, author, and CEO of Career Mastery and former COO for Morgan Stanley Europe. And I want to welcome you. I'm so excited to be here, and I'm so excited you are here and that you're choosing to spend this time to invest in yourself, to learn how to be more strategic. So I would love it for you to type in where you're joining from. I just want to see how global our audience is. And it's always such a joy. So just go ahead and type in right below this video where you are joining from if you're able to do that. If you are driving a car, please don't do that. um, so as you're doing that, what we're going to cover today is how today will roll is I'm going to teach for about 30 minutes or so. And I'm going to be teaching on what it means to be strategic, why it's important, 4 aspects of being strategic, and then 13 ways to become and be seen as strategic. Then we'll give you a chance to ask questions, and I will do my best to answer them. I love Q&A, so start thinking about your questions. You can type them in at any time. And Renee, my director of operations, will be popping on to help me with the Q&A. And then I urge you to stay to the end because we have a special bonus gift for you for joining us. And that is a bonus on 37 things to say and ask in meetings to sound strategic. I think you're going to find this really, really helpful. So I see people are typing in where they're calling in from. Wow, we are all over the world. Or at least over the US. Oh, yes, all over the world. We've got Fairfax, Ohio, Midwest, Mexico, Rhode Island, Philly, North Carolina, Arizona State University. Shout out to you. Columbus, Nebraska, Toronto. Oh, wow, a lot of people from Arizona, Florida, New Jersey. That's my home state. Yay. New York, Belgium, Costa Rica. Wow, lucky you. Sandy Phillips, Virginia, France. I love France. Frankfurt. I love Frankfurt. Malaysia. I've never been there. Jamaica, Illinois, Chicago, New Jersey. Shout out to more New Jerseyites. Well, this is fantastic. So I could go on for a while just celebrating where you're from, but I know your time is so valuable. So let's dive in. And first, let me start by just talking about what do we mean when we say be more strategic. And this is something I remember you writing on my team members, some of my team members' reviews. Needs to be more strategic. And I've had other people, other clients and people who are reading my blog posts write in that this is a big challenge for them. They're told you need to be more strategic. But then they ask around, what does that mean? And they get all different answers and nobody seems to really know. And that is exactly the point. Strategic and the definition of what it looks, feels, and sounds like to be strategic is in the eye of the beholder. And it means something a little bit different to different people. And that is why you might be struggling with it. So you are, as my mother says, nothing but normal. And it's really hard to do as a result. So let's start. I like to start with the dictionary definition. So the Oxford Dictionary says strategic means relating to the identification of long-term or overall aims and interests and the means of achieving them. So that sounds very official, but there's some key elements of this. The key elements I think of when I think of being strategic are that first you're planning for the future. So it's future oriented. And you're planning for the future to put the organization in a position to succeed going forward. It's also about having ideas and taking actions that are intentional, deliberate, and well thought through. All right. These are not seat of the pants type of things. And as you're having these ideas and sharing them, it's about being able to express them, these ideas, in a compelling way that others want to follow and join. So there's a little bit of leadership involved in this, in my view. And it's also being willing to make tough decisions, not just following the crowd. And Harvard Business Review had an article where they had this really nice quote that strategic people create connections between ideas, plans, and people that others fail to see. That means having insights and connecting the dots. So, this part about that others fail to see, well, if you feel like you're not being strategic right now, then you might be caught up in this group, being in the group of the others who don't see the connection between different dots. And the best way to start seeing the connections is to start looking for them. So, not to worry, you can do this. It's also being strategic. What it means is also about analyzing the situation, understanding the context, seeing the connections, and coming up with solutions. So there's a solutions orientation as well. Now, you might say, well, what's the opposite of being strategic? And for me, when I was writing these reviews and saying, yeah, Jonathan needs to be more strategic. What I was thinking is that the opposite was really being very tactical. Now, strategy and tactics are both really important, but the strategy is the what and the why. So it's your ability to conceptualize, to do the thinking, to take into account multiple perspectives. Whereas tactics is about getting it done. It's about the how and the when of executing on that strategy. So it's about executing, doing, and taking a very focused perspective on just getting your tasks done. So you could see why, if you're looking to move up to being that next level leader, maybe you're looking to get promoted, trying to advance in your organization or outside of your organization, that when people think of you as mostly being that doer, the tactical person, yes, you're really important. However, what they need increasingly is that person who can also be strategic and think and conceptualize and take into account multiple perspectives. So let me give you just a few examples of tactical versus strategic. So one example of being tactical is if you're turning out excellent work at your assignments without realizing that the agenda for your unit has changed. Something's changed in the market or your organization, and those assignments that you're working on are no longer exactly what the organization needs, but you haven't figured that out. So that can really hurt you in your career, and it will also make you look tactical and not strategic. So one of my analysts was so busy cranking out the merger model analysis that he didn't see that the target company had just been taken over by a third party company, a different company. And so this thing that he was working on was no longer going to be relevant, but he didn't know that, and he just kept cranking on until we came and stopped him. So on the other hand, being strategic, I think of it also as being someone who demonstrates heads up thinking. You're not just looking down at your work, but your head is up and you're looking around and seeing what the implications are. So there was a colleague of mine, Suzanne, who she was on my team, and she came to me and said, "Hey, May, I just saw this announcement on the tape, on the ticker tape, and I'm guessing that our meeting with that client is not going to happen, and that you probably don't need that analysis for tomorrow. But hey, maybe we can take all the work we've done and use it as the same concept with these other companies over here." So she was aware of what was going on around her and seeing the implications of what was in the press. And another example, in this case, an example of connecting the dots, it could be that, let's say you had 3 challenges that your group was facing. And somebody who was strategic, if you were strategic, you might say something like, "Hey, I was just thinking about our big goals for the year, and I wondered whether focusing on our efforts on Project X could be the linchpin we were looking for, because it's a solution that would address all 3 of the challenges that management is worried about." So hopefully those examples give you a bit of a sense of the difference between being tactical and strategic, and what your senior evaluators might be talking about or thinking about when they are saying, "Hey, you really need to be more strategic," or "We'd like you to be more strategic." So let's now talk about, why is this so important to learn how to do this? 2 reasons. The first is your advancement, okay? So for you to advance beyond a certain point, you need to be able to do this kind of thinking, and conceptualizing, making those tough decisions, anticipating the future, and basically showing that you can steer the ship. All right, that's what people are looking for. The second reason is that it will help you make a bigger impact. And most of us want to want to have meaning in our work. So impact is really about that meaning. And to make this difference in your work and through your work by delivering results, you need to be strategic at a minimum in how you deploy resources. So it's in your organization's best interests as well as your own for you to learn to be strategic. And we'll see in a moment that it takes some time to reorient the way you're thinking to show that you are strategic. And a common mistake, and one that I hear a lot, is that people feel guilty because if they aren't producing work output, if they aren't doing, and if they're instead sitting at their desk and thinking, because you appear to be doing nothing. And we're a society that's valuing busyness, but that's you don't need to feel guilty, all right, because it's a really important higher order of magnitude thing to do. And the ripple effects of your being strategic are far greater than you're just doing the tasks that you were assigned. Think of it like a bicycle. If you're in first gear in a 10-speed bicycle, that means one pedal turns the wheel one time, all right? But if you're in 10th gear, that means one pedal turns the wheel 10 times, or at least that's my understanding of how these gears work. So when you are in tactical mode and just doing, so that's you're in first gear, but being strategic is more like being in 10th gear, right? So there's ripple effects, there's knock-on effects and benefits to becoming and being seen as being strategic. And in fact, there are 4 aspects of being strategic. And we'll be taking a closer look at each of them in a moment. But first, let me go through the area so that we just identify them. And as I go through these at a high level for right now, I want you to be thinking about where you stand on each of them. Where are you strong already and can leverage that? And where would you like to build up more of your capacity to be and become seen as strategic? So the first area is your thinking. And what I mean by your thinking is, how are you thinking? And this is about engaging in critical thinking, not just linear thinking, analyzing what's going on around you, putting things in context, connecting the dots, synthesizing all this information that's coming at you. It's also about your mindset. There's a mental game to being strategic and coming across as strategic, because those are slightly different things. You might be thinking strategically, but you might not be coming across as that. So this mindset is, I call it the mental game of calm and logic. So the more you can be calm, the more you are going to come across as strategic. It's very hard to come across as strategic when you're frazzled or highly emotive about something. It's also about problem solving, being in problem solving mode in your thoughts and having a solutions orientation. And it's definitely about that long-term future orientation where you're planning ahead, you're not getting mired in the urgent and now, you're anticipating what might change in the organization externally, and you're identifying future opportunities. You're looking ahead and you're seeing things from multiple perspectives. So that's your thinking. The second aspect is your decision making. And this is about, what are you thinking? What are you considering? What do you consider when you make decisions? Are you taking into account the broader organization and the market environment and all the other relevant factors, not just what's in front of you, not just what's in the interest of you personally or your own group? Are you considering how aligned your decision is with the mission and values, whether it's of your organization or your clients? Are you getting input from a diverse set of people and sources? And are you thinking about the second and third order effects of what you are deciding to do or not to do? And your decision making also is about how you decide to spend your time. And this is where the Eisenhower grid is one that you may be familiar with, but it's awfully helpful because it shows you that you really want to be making sure you're spending time on the important but not urgent. So in this grid across the top is what's urgent versus non-urgent. And in each row, it's what's important and not important. So this is where you can take all your tasks and put them into one of these boxes and decide what to do with them. So the urgent and important, you kind of have to do now. The urgent but not important, you want to delegate. The not important, not urgent, you don't want to do at all. Just forget about those. And then this important top right box, important but not urgent. That's the one that when you are being strategic, that you are able to focus on that top right box, important but not urgent. And so often we're so caught up in this top left box, or even the top left and the bottom left, that we don't do the top right. And it's impossible to be strategic if you're deciding to spend your time on the wrong things. And then your decision making is also about how you decide to approach the issues that come up. You want to be proactive rather than reactive. So now let's move on to the third aspect, which is your communication. And here it's about being clear, concise, succinct, to the point, and on point. And you want to be able to communicate in a way that inspires people to come along with you, to join the movement. It's about the words you use, how you sound, your energy and enthusiasm for it, whether there's a solutions orientation as opposed to complaining, and are you being encouraging? And I also find it helpful in your communication to come at it from a place of curiosity and wonder. Because that'll encourage you to ask questions. And you'll see in a moment that questions are kind of important. And that when you come at it from a place of curiosity and wonder, you're also likely to be more innovative. You won't just be a cog in the wheel doing your job, clocking in, clocking out. In your role. And you also will be communicating in a way that conveys confidence. And this could have to do with your word choice and your phrasing and your tone. So communication is really important. And then the fourth aspect is your behavior. And this is importantly, in terms of coming across as strategic, it's about speaking up and choosing when you speak up, how you speak, what you say, how you say it. And most importantly of all, when you are being strategic, you are someone who has a perspective. You have a point of view. And when it's a very junior thing to say, gee, I don't know, go ask my boss, right? That doesn't sound like somebody who's operating at a higher strategic level and could one day rise, advance, get promoted, run a bigger part of the responsibilities of the organization. And you want to show that your understanding extends beyond your unit. Your behavior is also about taking calculated risks. You don't want to be crazy risk taker, extreme risk taker. You also don't want to be so conservative that you never take any risk at all. It's really about taking calculated risks based on your analysis. That's a thinking part, and your decision making that we just talked about before. It's about being proactive, driving things forward, anticipating the future, having an orientation toward action that positions your unit and your organization for success, and also bringing others along with you. So you want to be consulting people and not doing everything yourself. So those are the four areas. And now I want to share with you 13 ways to become and be seen as strategic. And we're going to do that in clusters. So out of the 13, the first three are in the how you're thinking part. So in terms of how you're thinking, the first way that I want to share is to clear your mind. You really need to have a clear head to make good strategic decisions, including about how you spend your valuable time and energy. You can't think clearly if you're worrying, you're multitasking, you're fighting fires, you're operating mostly on caffeine and adrenaline like I used to be, or all of the above. You know, I struggled to learn how to become strategic because I was so good at doing things, but you really want to make sure you're clearing your mind so that you can have more strategic thoughts. And for most of us, Clearing your mind requires slowing down, which is really hard in this busy, always on world. So if you can find a way to stop rushing around, stop filling in every minute of your day with tasks or meetings, stop filling up your calendar with just things that are somebody else's agenda, and clearing your mind of all that unnecessary clutter is the foundation for thinking strategically, which brings us to the second way to be and be seen as strategic, which is making time to think. All right. So once you've cleared your mind, you want to make time to think. So I suggest that you block out time for broader strategic thinking time and honor those time slots. Get help. If your assistant can help you, put some kind of label on it that doesn't look like it's just, oh, it's just my coffee time. No, it's your strategic time, or call it something else. And another way to block out time is what I call the 5-minute rule. So 5 minutes, at least 5 minutes before you go into any meeting or call, take 5 minutes. So stop whatever you're working on and take that last 5 minutes to organize your thoughts and ideas into categories, into the points you want to make. It will really pay off in dividends so that you don't walk into those meetings or calls cold and just get thrown into it without a plan. All right. You want to have a plan in those meetings. And then you want to also be able to create time by looking at your task list and deciding what you can automate, delegate, or eliminate. So this is ADE. And one of my friends in a mastermind I belong to shared this with us. I can't remember where the source was from, but you basically create 3 columns on a piece of paper. You write A, D, and E on the top of the respective columns. A for automate, D for delegate, E for eliminate. And you take all of the tasks that you have, and then you keep the ones that you really want to do, and then all the rest of them goes into one of those 3 categories, and you'd be surprised how much time you can create. Then the third way to be and be seen as strategic is to do what I call pay attention. I know it sounds ridiculously simple, but it's actually kind of crucial and not always easy to implement. So when I say pay attention, what I mean is observe what is going on around you. What is going on, especially in the interactions, in meetings and on calls? What are your senior leaders and managers concerned about? What are they interested in? What aren't they interested in? You know, when one of your colleagues says something and he or she is immediately shut down, well, what were they talking about? Clearly that's not of interest, right? And similarly on the other side, what is of interest? How do people present their ideas? How do senior people present their ideas? The people you see as being strategic, how do they talk about it? And then how do those other people who aren't strategic present their ideas, and how do those ideas land? Pay attention to what's said versus unsaid. And what's unsaid, you know, it's like the filmmakers, what the editing that goes into a major motion picture. A lot of the film, the majority of the film ends up on the cutting room floor. Same thing when you're being strategic. You got to edit out a lot of what is going on. And so look at what's said versus not said. It doesn't need to be said. And what kind of questions are people asking? And then you want to be purposeful when you read things. When you read anything, you know, you're not just reading words. There are times when I've read the same sentence 5 or 6 times, but actually what you want to be doing is thinking about, why am I reading this thing? And look at it through a broader lens. Look for themes, look for patterns, and think about what the implications are when you read the news, or when you read even books. You know, what are the implications for your unit and your organization of what you're learning? And finally, in this area, it's taking the balcony view. You know, get up in the theater to the balcony level and put yourself in your senior manager's shoes to understand their perspective, looking at the whole theater and not just from one of the seats on the floor. Which then takes us to the decision-making cluster. So items 4, 5, and 6 are all part of the decision-making cluster here. So the fourth way is to take a systems view. So that's similar to what we were just talking about on the balcony, but it's about looking across. So you want to consider the entire ecosystem of stakeholders and constituencies when you're making decisions, not just your own area. And there are always these interdependencies. So if you make a decision in your unit, it's going to affect some of the other units, which will then affect some of the other units and maybe external competitors, clients, customers. So you want to broaden your perspectives and horizons. And that's what I mean by take a systems view. The fifth way is to make data-driven decisions. So when you're making decisions, when you're being strategic, then you are adding rigor to your decisions by looking at the data. You're not just following hunches alone. For example, can you split test the options that you're considering to find the best one? So it's like the old cola commercials, a side-by-side taste test of Pepsi versus Coke, right? You're testing, split testing. And if the data doesn't yet exist that you want to get, then maybe you can come across as strategic by making the case to the organization for collecting data so that your unit and the company can be making data-driven decisions. Then number 6 is to look at the opportunity cost. So if you're being strategic, when you make decisions, then you're going to be looking at the cost of doing something, because when you say yes to one thing, it means you're going to have to say no to something else, or maybe several other things. And you want to be aware of that. And you want to make sure that those are being factored into your decisions. And this also applies to the way you decide to spend your time. What's the opportunity cost of saying yes to this project? How is that going to affect your ability to deliver on the things that you're really interested in delivering on? Then number 7, the 7th way, is to look for the third way. So strategic thinkers, when they're making decisions, if they're faced with an either or dilemma or trade-off, they always look for the third way. And Roger Martin, the former dean of Rotman Business School at the University of Toronto, wrote a book called The Opposable Mind. That's all about how to look for that third way. So it takes the best out of the two options that don't really serve you well, and takes the best of both and finds the third option that's superior to the other two. And I love the saying that when you have one option, that's an option. When you have two options, that's a dilemma. And when you have three options, I've not done this with the right fingers. When you have three options, that's a choice. So you want to look for the third way. So let's move on to the communication cluster. And this is for numbers 8, 9, and 10. So the 8th way to come across as strategic is to ask questions. I was hinting at this all throughout this, but when you ask questions, especially the ones, you want to be asking questions that reveal that you are thinking more broadly and deeply. For example, you might ask something like, how does this affect the customer experience? So if everybody's talking about something from a production standpoint, then you might open up the conversation by asking, that's all great. And how does this affect the customer experience? And that can just totally shift the direction of the conversation. And the customer is awfully important. And sometimes people forget about one dimension or another. So it's really nice if you can ask a question that brings this in. Another question would be, what would happen if we didn't do this? So you can see the power of questions to sound strategic, to appear more senior, to appear more leader-like. And by the way, I mentioned that we have this special bonus for you for joining us. And that is going to very much focus on what kind of questions can you be asking. In fact, I'll be sharing 37 of them. So use them in good health. So number 9 is to speak up and share your thoughts. To be seen as strategic, people need to hear your voice. And you want to be having ideas and then advocating for them. And when you share those ideas, then you want to be able to articulate your logic, ideally in a narrative. This is like storytelling. And this has become a buzzword now in the world of business, that you need to have a narrative, a storytelling. Humans are hardwired for storytelling. And just as an example, the most simple, basic storyline that I found works really well when you're trying to advocate for something to change is to say, what we've been doing up till now was good, but things have changed. Now, what we need to do to produce the results is to do X. So that's a great way to articulate a narrative that allows you to gracefully introduce change without making the people who were suggesting, who have developed the current way, without making them sound bad. You want to have facts and figures and anecdotes to back up whatever you have proposed. And this shows that you've thought about things. Use analogies to tie together things that your audience is already familiar with, like my bicycle gears example. Or you could say, yeah, it's going to look a lot like the dashboard of your car. People, okay, I get it. And along those lines, you might want to create a visual so that people get the idea right away. And I always like to say, use the rule of three, which is just 3 key points. And we learned this in consulting. And my friends at McKinsey always tell me that you only have 3 bullet points on a slide. Not 2, not 4, you have 3. Maybe you have 1 or 3. I don't know why 2 is bad, but the human brain can only keep track of 3 things at the same time and remember them. So number 10 is to emphasize forward-looking conversations. So that this is important because you want to show that you're not so caught up in the immediate and urgent tasks that you're missing the bigger picture. So you want to be seen as someone who can drive activity rather than somebody who's waiting to receive instructions or reacting to somebody else's initiative. That's somebody who's not being strategic. And by the way, it'll also keep you from gossiping or complaining about policies or other people. So forward-looking is always the way to go. And then the numbers 11, 12, and 13, they are all in the cluster about behavior. So the 11th way to to be seen as strategic is to identify important projects and then advocate for moving them forward. You don't want to be passively waiting for somebody else to assign you an activity or invite you to make suggestions. Be proactive and then be thoughtful also in choosing those initiatives that are going to make an impact. But it's all about identifying it and advocating for it and actually moving something forward. That's a very strategic and leader-like way to behave. Number 12 is to seek out different perspectives. So you want to be talking to people who have a different background, different viewpoint, different set of responsibilities than you do. You want to be reading things from a variety of sources, some of which are not directly related to your specific area, because all of these creates more dots. Each dot is a piece of information or an idea or a concept or a case study. So by doing this, you're creating more dots for you to connect so that you can be strategic about which bits you can bring back to what you're doing and what your team is doing, your organization is doing, to make it more successful. What can you borrow from other industries and other teams and implement in your sphere? And this will help you to generate more ideas, more solutions, and more pathways to success for the unit. And number 13 is to cultivate an aura of composure. I can't emphasize enough how helpful this is to come across as the strategic person that you are. All right. So check in with yourself on how likely you are to be coming across. Think about, what would the soundtrack of your last 24 hours sound like? What would the video version of you in the last 24 hours look like? All right. And there was a time when the video version of me was carrying a huge stack of papers and scurrying through the hallway because I was always dashing to a meeting at the last minute. because in my head, the narrative, the storyline I was telling myself was to be a really valuable employee, I needed to be working to the last possible second and then minimize the amount of time of traveling to the next meeting and arriving there. And I thought that was being really productive and really impressive. And then I read one of the many, many self-help magazines that I was reading at the time. And there was this article about, do you run through the hallways? Stop. Don't do that. Have you ever seen your CEO running through the hallways? And I'm going, oh my word, no, my CEO would never do that. He would either be fashionably late or he would leave in time to be able to stride there and be on time. So then I realized the visual of me was like scurrying around like a little rat. And that was definitely not looking very strategic. And it was not going to help me advance in the organization or be taken more seriously. It probably made me look like I was disorganized. So hopefully you won't have the same video track as I did, but be honest with yourself, right? You're not going to have to share that with anybody else. So do what you need to do to create calm and compose yourself. So for example, slow down and breathe. You can meditate, you could take a walk in nature, or even just be deliberate in your actions. Just slow it down. And this keeps you from appearing to rush around. It keeps you from looking harried and hassled, and it keeps you from being too busy to think. So those are the 13 ways that you can become and be seen as more strategic. And I'm going to pause here and invite my Director of Operations, Renee, to join us so that we can touch on questions, assuming we have gotten questions. If not, then we'll move on.
Hi, May.
Hi, Renee.
Hi. Yeah, we have a couple great questions. The first one is from John Hall, who's watching on YouTube.
Hello,
So
John.
You just popped it up here, and it's to do with the Eisenhower matrix you shared. How do you decide what is important?
Oh, great question. So you want to look at things through. Now we're talking about your professional life here, I'm assuming. So assuming that, because there are a lot of things that are very, very important that might or might not fit into this answer that I'm about to give. So what I would look at is what matters most to the organization and the people who are decision makers and influencers in your organization. So it's, and that is an important way to make sure that your decisions are being aligned with the mission, values, and goals of your unit, your team, your unit, your department, your division, your organization. So you always want to be in alignment. So John, type in to let us know whether that answers your question. But that's the way that I would most go about it. And of course, they need to be aligned with your values as well.
Yes, and just on that similar note, we had a great comment from Jose who shared this insight that you could use the quad chart with your boss when everything is a priority and work it out together.
Jose, that's a brilliant answer. Because yes, you don't want to be making assumptions. And by the way, I think that would be Jose's suggestion is brilliant on so many levels, because not only does it give you clarity on what is important in the organization, it also gives you an opportunity to be having a strategic level conversation with your boss or any other senior stakeholders. You know, what really matters to you. That's really cool. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Jose. And we have another question from Jenny, who was watching on YouTube. Is there a balance between tactical and strategic? Are you only one or the other? If you are strategic, are you never tactical?
This is another great point, Jenny. So we're all being strategic and tactical, and it's always a blend. And what you want to make sure, so remember, the difference between them is that the strategic is the what and the why, and the tactical is the when and the how. So the strategic piece is setting the plan, and then you need to have specific actions, which are the tactics, in order to carry out that plan. So both are really important. And the way I think about it is that the more senior you get, the more the weighting of being strategic grows. So if you were to think about if this is from 0% to 100% weight, and along this axis is, ooh, I'm getting myself a little twisted, but I was going to say that in the beginning, tactical is probably 80% of what matters, because you're just being asked to get stuff done, and you still want to show your strategic and heads up thinking. So that's probably 20%. But by the time you get so along the bottom is seniority. And by the time you get to very senior, then it's 80-20 the other way around. So most of your evaluation is going to be on whether you're strategic, and the tactical piece is going to be less important in terms of how people are valuing your contributions. So you have to watch out for where that inflection point is for when it goes 80-20 one way to 80-20 the other way, so that you don't miss that switch point where you're still thinking you're valued based on just doing what you're being asked, the tactics. But they're both important, and we're always doing a combination. I hope that helps you.
Great. And maybe we'll just take one or two more questions. So we have one here from anonymous user. So my immediate supervisor is more the strategic of our team, and I am the more tactical. What do you advise when we want to implement plans, but higher management isn't always on board?
Yeah. So when this is slightly a different question, in that it's about getting people on board as opposed to trying to help you be more strategic, as I understand it. But this is a situation that comes up a lot. And what I think is really important is to understand what that higher management, what their goals are. What do they see as important? What are they valuing the most? And then presenting whatever it is, your strategy and tactics, to them in a way that fits in with what they're trying to achieve. And I also really like to understand what is it that they object to. And a question I like to ask, if I presented something and they go, no, it's like, no. I don't really like to leave it right there. What I like to do is say, okay, I respect that. So tell me, what would need to be true in order for this to be something attractive for the organization, or in your mind? So I want to get them to talk about what it is that needs to happen, or what needs to be true, so that we can be in a dialogue, in a conversation. Because no isn't necessarily no forever. It might just be a couple of pieces don't really fit with the overall strategy or goals of the senior management, in which case, if you identify those, maybe you can modify those, or maybe you can do it in phases, so you can adjust once you have more information beyond just the no. So that's what I would suggest. And yeah, don't feel like you're going to higher management like Oliver Twist with the begging bowls, like, more please, and they go no, and then you go back to your office or cubicle or whatever, try and come at it with a conversation. And the other thing is, I also like to not go to my higher ups without having already starting to socialize it with them. So I might even start out by saying, we're embarking on this project. I want to make sure it's aligned with the mission and the strategy of the firm. here are the things that we're thinking about. Are there certain things you want us to watch out for? And just get some of that guidance and parameters up front. And don't wait until you've got the whole thing tied up with a bow to present it, because by then it's just totally baked. Instead, there's an element of co-creating it with them or letting them in on the process, but doing that without sounding like you need their brains to set the strategy. You're presenting some concepts, but go there in stages before it's fully baked and it's a yes or no.
Great. Oh, I was going to say wrap up, but we just got one more question, and this could be the very last one. Great. All right. This one says, do you have any specific tips on how strategic thinking and behavior can be used in securing a promotion? Very on topic.
Yeah, very on topic. I think that showing that you are able to be strategic is essential for getting promotions beyond the very first couple. And so I think it's completely aligned with setting yourself up for advancement in the form of promotion or greater responsibility. I think one really effective way is to be seen as a person who could be a good sounding board for your managers. Become that person that they feel comfortable to talk to about things and bounce ideas off of. Because oftentimes, I'd be at a senior level myself, and I'd want to have a sense for how the more middle ranks, the junior ranks might react to something before we announced it. Sort of like the question we had before. Was it from Jenny? I can't remember who it was from, but on how do we, or no, this is the anonymous LinkedIn person. But before we just go splat, here it is, bow tied around it, can't change it anymore. And so if I knew that somebody on my team was a strategic thinker and somebody I could count on to have good ideas, to have their finger on the pulse, I would find that really valuable. And the more you have that kind of trusted relationship with senior people who are also influencers and decision makers in your promotion, the more you're going to have some really strong advocates for you behind closed doors, and people who are going to feel very comfortable putting their own political capital and social capital on the line to say, yeah, I mean, Tigger Coin is somebody I really believe in and want to promote. So I hope that helps.
Great. And we have another question here. Stefan, I hope I pronounced that correctly. Thanks for all your tips. Learning from you, what are the 3 key ones to nurture most out of the 13? So the 13 ways to be seen as strategic.
Oh, Stefan, and I hope I'm pronouncing your name properly too. You're asking me to choose among my children here. But this is a great question. Okay, so to me, number one is to make time to think. You cannot be truly strategic in your thinking. You just can't fit it in between chopping and changing. It's like if you're a short order cook, which I've always thought I'd be a great short order cook. You're just trying to keep all the orders flowing. It's very hard to stop and think bigger thoughts. So I think that's number one. You really have to make time to think, and and do what you need to do to get resources to delegate to carve out time, to respect that time, and to do something with that time. So that'd be number one. Number two would be to take a systems view. I think when you look across the entire piece and you look at things holistically, as opposed to, oh yeah, there's this I'm in this silo and I'm just going to consider this silo because I don't even know about the other ones. And a lot of big organizations, I know the one I was in, we tried very hard, but everybody's got their own backyard type of thing, which I'm calling a silo. So if you can look at cutting across, look at the whole picture of the whole ecosystem, and not just your organization, but beyond that, that is how your senior management is thinking. All right. I can promise you that your CEO, the C-suite, they are taking a very systems view of things, because if they don't, they can totally miss the boat, and become irrelevant. Like, well, look at Eastman Kodak and their lack of their poor decision making to stick with just film, and they didn't go into digital, and they are now no longer in existence. So you really have to take the systems view. And then I think the third one, depending on where you are in your career, it's some combination of the communication pieces of either speaking up and sharing your thoughts combined with asking questions. I think that it's important to, it's very hard to show that you're strategic if you're not also sounding strategic and sharing ideas that are strategic, because you always want to that is a way that you can have the broadest number of people look at you and say, yeah, wow, Stefan, he's really strategic. I wish I could think of things through that lens. And that just puts you in a whole nother category. So those are the three. Since you so elegantly have asked such a great question and forced me to choose three. But if you're already strong in those three, then choose another one. So you know what? Maybe the right answer is, for each of us, it's a slightly different answer. But all other things equal, those would be my three. I hope that helps. Thank you for your excellent question.
Great. And I think that's all we have time for questions for today.
Fantastic. Yeah, because Renee and I wanted to make sure that we got you out in time for your next meeting at the top of the hour. So this is the point at which, Renee, if you could share the what I call the super awesome bonus. I'm very enthusiastic about this, and I really encourage you to download this, read through it, use it, and I'd love to hear back how it goes. This link is for the cheat sheet on 37 things to say and ask in meetings to sound strategic. And as you're downloading this, I'd love to hear your biggest takeaway from today. If you could type it wherever you are, whatever platform you're on, just type it under the video. That would be great. I know you're all watching from different places. And I'm seeing some really nice comments. You're welcome, Mariana. Hello, Mariana. Deja, Parminder, nice to see all of you. Crystal, thank you for being here. Susan, Stefan, Z, Felicia. Yeah, you're welcome. That's great.
And some people are asking if the recording will be available for future. Yes, you'll be able to watch it here on LinkedIn or YouTube or wherever you're viewing this now. The recording will stay up.
Yes, yes. And if you're on our mailing list, then we will also be emailing that out to you, that link. So are we getting any takeaways here? Oh, I appreciate the tidbit on composure and not hurrying around. Yes, yes. I wish someone had told me that. Mary, I'm glad you had many notes. Kim asks, is the download available in the chat? Yes, I am not sure. I'm not sure. And by the way, I should also say that the replay will also be on the platforms, whatever platform you're watching it. So with that, then I just wanted to say thank you so much for joining me and Renee. This is May Bush, encouraging you to keep learning, keep growing, and keep going.